Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say he murdered three. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike.shop. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Spear of Destiny. In case you're wondering, all you dog people out there, Em is doing great. Her neck healed up, and we haven't seen the other dog or his owner. It was a bit dodgy there the first couple of trips to the park, but she seems to not worry anymore. Thanks to Buffalo Blake, we have a show this week. He wrote in and asked to hear about the Spear of Destiny. Some call it the Holy Lance, while others call it the Spear of Longinus. The spear is only mentioned in the Gospel of John, 19:31 through 37. It is never mentioned in any other books. This isn't all that unusual. The story about Jesus turning water into wine is only mentioned one time in the book of John. Now, I'm not a Bible scholar, so I may have missed something, but this is how it looked to me. If you don't believe what is said in the Bible, then you probably won't believe the spear holds any power. The two are intertwined. You could just assume the spear is magical for some mysterious reason, but without looking at the historical records from the Bible, you won't have any reason for the thing to exist. Knowing why is an important part of the story. There are a lot of things missing from the Bible. During the First Council of Nicaea in 325, the books that would make up the Bible were chosen. 382, the Council of Rome said the apocryphal texts were also included in the list of sacred books officially accepted as genuine, but they were left out of the Bible anyway. Rome conquered Jerusalem in 63 BC. They had a policy of placing locals in charge so the people felt like they were sort of still in charge. As long as you paid your taxes and you didn't cause trouble, you could carry on living your life the way you wanted. In those days, Roman taxes totaled 1% of a man's income. In 1775, the colonists were paying up to 20% in taxes. This is supposed to be the reason behind the revolution. Today, I'm paying about 25%, sometimes 30%. The local king was responsible for maintaining the peace and enforcing laws. They even had their own small armies to keep things in order. Over the king was a Roman governor who tended to stay out of the day-to-day routine. During the time of Jesus was in Judea, there were several others running around saying they were the Messiah. In Abrahamic religions, a Messiah or Messiah is a savior or liberator of a group of people. In the Hebrew Bible, a Messiah, that's a hard word to pronounce, Mashiach is a king or a high priest. All of the folks running around saying they were the Messiah had followers. They would travel the countryside telling people all kinds of things, but not really doing anything. They didn't perform any miracles, and nobody was raised from the dead. King Herod ignored these people because they didn't pose a threat to him or his position as puppet king. Then along came Jesus, who wasn't actually named Jesus. His name was Yeshua, but that's a whole other story. I'll save the probably correct location of his birth for the Christmas show also. In Judaism, it is believed that the Messiah would be an earthly human king who would be a great military leader and judge who would unite the Jewish people in a Jewish state. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, or was it Bethlehem of Nazareth? Is it Jesus of Judea or Jesus of Nazareth? Anyway, in the days of King Herod, wise men came from the east, arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star at its rising and have come to worship him." Suddenly King Herod's scared. These men are telling him the King of the Jews is now living and Herod's days are numbered. He sends his men to kill every boy under 2 years of age, figuring one of them had to be Jesus. Joseph is visited by an angel who tells him to take his family and run. There's no record of how long they stayed away. King Herod was called Herod the Great, not because he was a great ruler, but a great builder. He built the new temple and he covered it with gold. He built a lot of huge buildings all over Jerusalem. Herod also appointed the high priests who would obey his orders. Any priest that questioned him was killed and replaced with a flunky. The law dictated that the high priest, once ordained, should hold office for the remainder of his life. During the dynasty of Herods, the office of high priest had become a reward for political loyalty. Once Herod kicked the bucket, Joseph was given the all clear to return home. As the Romans took greater control of the region, they established a large military presence there, and they assigned a prefect to govern the people. Pontius Pilate became the prefect. Now, Jesus was actually performing miracles, and he had developed a huge following. Soon, the priests in Jerusalem began to take notice. Of course, they didn't believe the stories, they just knew that he had a lot of people following him around. To the ears of the high priests, the apostles sounded like they may have posed a threat to their position of favor with the Romans. They could justify their actions by telling themselves that as long as they kept the peace, thousands of Jews would be able to live their lives. They began to conspire on how to kill Jesus. There was no legal basis for the arrest of Jesus, as there were never any formal charges registered against him. No evidence of illegal activity was ever offered to justify him being taken by force to answer allegations against him. He was simply placed under arrest and taken into custody at the behest of the religious leaders who wanted him dead. Eventually, Jesus was actually accused of blasphemy. The priests said he had blasphemed while preaching at the temple. They never said what it was Jesus had said that was wrong. They just said he did it. Once found guilty of a religious crime, they needed the Romans' approval to put anyone to death. Jesus was tried before Prefect Pontius Pilate. It is unclear what the charges against him may have been under Roman law. Someone had to have made a case saying Jesus was trying to overthrow Roman rule by becoming the King of the Jews. This is the justification for the crucifixion. There are a lot of nasty ways to die. For me, the worst one is impalement. The way Vlad Tepes did it was, well, way over the top. You could last up to 3 or 4 days. The second would be crucifixion. Now, crucifixion was also a long way to die. Some people believed the shape of the torture device was a cross. Others say it was more like a giant T. To put somebody on a cross, you would need a lot of men to hoist the cross into a vertical position. It would take a lot of time. The Romans were known to crucify hundreds, even thousands of people in one day. If the device was more like a T, it would only take a few men to get the crosspiece onto the main post. Some scientists actually experimented to see which was easier to do, and they discovered that the T-shape was a lot easier and a lot quicker to work with. With the T-shape, it'd only take a couple of minutes and a few men to get the main piece across the up and down part. Once you're finished with the accused, you could lift them off and reuse the main post over and over. 6,000 people were crucified on a single day in 71 BC. Now really, the shape is not that important. Too many folks get all upset over details. Jesus was going to be killed using a nasty Roman torture device. The fact that he died is the important part, not so much what the thing looked like. Pain. Lots of pain. People would gather to watch. Many relatives of the condemned. Let's just say it took place and it was bad. Jesus had been arrested on a Thursday and condemned on a Friday. Some say it was the 13th. There was a bit of a problem under Jewish law. The body had to be down and in the ground before sunset. The Sabbath was about to begin, and not just the Sabbath, but the Passover Sabbath. The Gospel states that the Romans planned to break Jesus' legs, a practice known as crucifixion, which was a method of hastening death during a crucifixion. Just before they did so, they realized that Jesus was already dead, and there was now no reason to break his legs. Jesus died at 3 p.m., the same time the high priest was sacrificing the Passover lamb. The ground shook and the curtain separating the holy from the most holy was torn. When Pilate heard Jesus was dead, he was surprised. Usually it took hours or even days for the condemned to die. A centurion was sent to be sure Jesus was dead so the body could be turned over to the next of kin. The Roman soldier took his spear and pierced Jesus in the side, and blood and water flowed from the wound. Jesus was quite dead, and his body was taken down, bathed according to Jewish tradition, and placed in a tomb provided by Joseph of Arimathea. Not a relative, but he provided the tomb. As for the soldier, his name was Longinus, as found in the Acts of Pilate. In some stories, his name is given as Gaius Cassius. In Christian tradition, he is described as a convert to Christianity. His name first appeared in the apocryphal Gospel of Nicodemus. The lance is called the Holy Lance, and the story is related in the Gospel of John during the crucifixion. What made it holy? It was covered in the blood from Jesus. In a letter from Herod to Pilate, and keep in mind, Herod the Great was dead, but his name was taken by his descendants. The letter said that Longinus suffered after piercing Jesus, and that he was condemned to a cave where every night a lion came and mauled him until dawn. after which his body healed back to normal, in a pattern that would repeat till the end of time. This story sounds more like myth than actual event. The Greek god Prometheus stole fire and gave it to man. His punishment as a consequence of the theft was Zeus, king of the Olympic gods, sentenced Prometheus to eternal torment for his transgression. Prometheus was bound to a rock, and an eagle was sent to eat his liver. His liver would then regrow back overnight, only to be eaten again the next day in an ongoing cycle. You see how the two kind of sound familiar? The conversion to Christianity was started when Longinus stabbed Jesus, and the blood splashed into his eyes. Longinus had been troubled with bad eyesight. Suddenly, his vision cleared, and he attributed this sight to being washed in the blood of Christ, literally. Archaeologists have found documents detailing optical-themed works that date all the way back to 1000 BC. Now, Longinus would have looked pretty weird wearing a pair of glasses. He was having difficulty seeing, and it would have been a major drawback for anyone, especially a soldier. The body of Jesus was placed in a tomb and guarded by Roman soldiers for 3 days. When the body vanished, the priests who had him killed tried to bribe the soldiers to say the followers of Jesus had stolen it. Now Longinus refused to accept the bribe. Instead, he quit the army and was baptized. After he left the army, Longinus took instructions from the apostles and became a monk in Cappadocia. He was arrested for his faith and had all of his teeth knocked out and his tongue cut out. Well, Longinus miraculously continued to speak clearly, and he managed to destroy several idols in the presence of the governor. The governor was blinded by the demons that came from the idols, but then had his sight restored when Longinus was beheaded. Blood from the beheading splashed into the governor's eyes and healed them. The head of Longinus was thrown in the garbage outside the city wall. A blind woman had a dream telling her to go find the head. She somehow managed to dig the head out of the trash. She cleaned it and buried it next to the body of her son. Her vision was restored. Now, this could be just some story, or it could be real. Yes, it's unbelievable, but then so is the story of Lazarus. Saint Longinus is the patron saint of Mantua, which is where his relics are preserved. I would think he would be the patron saint of the blind, or maybe those of us who need glasses. This would make sense, but the Vatican doesn't take advice from me. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm not really Catholic. I'll try calling them later and tell them what I think, and they'll probably not listen. Longinus's legend grew over the years to the point that he was said to have converted to Christianity after the crucifixion, and he is traditionally venerated as a saint in the Catholic Church, Eastern Orthodox Church, and several other Christian communities. After regaining his eyesight, Longinus said that this was indeed the Son of God. The lance that had touched Jesus' body and blood was still property of the Roman army. It was passed into the hands of Maurice, the head of the 3rd century garrison of Roman soldiers who came from Thebes in Upper Egypt. In 287, Maximian, a junior Roman emperor, ordered Maurice and 6,599 of his men to attack local Christians in a town that is in what is now known as Switzerland. They were to kill everyone and then make sacrifices to the pagan gods and pay homage to the emperor. Maurice and all his men refused. Maximian ordered the army to be decimated. It drives me nuts when I hear reporters say some town was decimated. I hear it all the time. A town gets wiped out and somebody says it was decimated. They must not know what the term means. In Roman times, if an army showed cowardice in battle or refused orders, the sentence would be decimation. The soldiers would draw lots. 1/10 of them would lose the draw. The other 90% would have to beat them to death. If not, the entire army would be put to death. Soldiers who worked, lived, and fought as a family were now having to kill members of their own group, their friends, their companions. This was decimation. Removal of 10%. Decimal point. On occasion, the soldiers would be decimated, would be turned over to another army for execution. At first, the emperor had every 10th man killed, but when they still refused to follow orders, he ordered the entire army killed. The bravery and martyrdom of Maurice became legendary, and Maurice later became a patron saint of the Holy Roman Emperors, and the patron saint of soldiers, swordsmiths, armies, and infantrymen. For centuries, Holy Roman Emperors were anointed at his altar in St. Peter's Basilica. You can ask, why didn't Maurice use the power of the spear to save himself and his men? Up until then, the only magical power shown by the spear had been repairing someone's eyesight. Do you have a relic sitting around your house? Does it hold power? How do you know if you never pull it out and give it a try? Maybe Maurice didn't know the spear could have made him all-powerful. Or maybe he knew but thought it was the wrong thing to do with the holy relic. The spear passed through a multitude of hands, coming into the possession of many of Europe's most important political and military leaders, including Constantine I. How it was determined to be a holy relic is open to debate. Some say the spear tip was used to heal injured or sick soldiers or servants. Others said it was discovered through some spiritual intervention, something like a vision or a dream. Finding a spear tip would lead to thoughts of why would this spear tip be valuable? Why the visions or the healings? There are a few spears mentioned in the Bible, and only one comes to mind immediately. Throughout his life, Constantine ascribed his success to his conversion to Christianity and the support of the Christian God. Just before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, Constantine saw a huge cross in the sky. He declared if he was victorious in battle, he would convert to Christianity. He won, and so he did. Byzantium took on the name City of Constantine, or Constantinople, after its foundation under Roman Emperor Constantine I, who transferred the capital of the Roman Empire to Byzantium in 330. And designated his new capital officially as Nova Roma, or New Rome. A lot of people don't realize that at one time there were two popes. What had happened was they had the pope in Rome, who sometimes wasn't even in Rome. He would move to another part of Italy. And then there was a second pope who was in Constantinople. Many say that Constantine's success was made possible because he had the spear of Longinus, which was becoming known as the Spear of Destiny. In 326, Constantine's mother, Helena, embarked on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. In another story, Helena found the spear tip and sent it to her son. Either way, he had the spear, and he was very powerful. Constantine died in 337, and the spear found its way to someone new. At the Battle of Adrianople in 378, the Emperor Valens, with the best parts of the Roman armies, were destroyed by the Visigoths. Alaric, the Visigoth king, who sacked Rome in the year 410, had come into possession of the spear and used its power to win. Did he know it held such power, or did he discover it during the battle? We don't know. Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, was born in 748. He grew to power and eventually united most of Europe by 800. During the early Middle Ages, he united the majority of Western and Central Europe. He was the first recognized emperor to rule from Western Europe since the fall of the Western Roman Empire around 3 centuries earlier. The expanded Frankish state that Charlemagne founded is called the Carolingian Empire. He died in 814, and with his death the spear vanished once more. The spear came into the possession of an English king, Aethelstan, along with the sword of Constantine and the lance of Charlemagne. The English nation would have vanished from history in the 10th century had it not been for one crucial battle, the Battle of Brunanburh. A combined army of Scottish, Welsh, and Norse vastly outnumbered the Anglo forces of Aethelstan. The battle went to the English despite overwhelming odds against them. Aethelstan credited the victory to the Spear of Destiny that he possessed and carried into battle. Shortly before his death, the Spear of Destiny passed to Heinrich of Germany as part of a dowry. Heinrich I, the King of Germany, ruled from 919 to 936. The spear was presented at his victorious battle against the Magyars. It was passed to his son, Otto I and the Great, the second Saxon king of Germany. Pope John XII used the spear to christen Otto I, Holy Roman Emperor. Otto went on to carry the spear into victory over the Mongols at the Battle of Lech. After his death, there are conflicting stories of what happened to the spear. One story said it found its way to Antioch. Way back then, soldiers weren't paid a salary. This had ended with the fall of the Roman Empire. When a king wanted to raise an army, he would simply tell everyone, they're now in the army. Any land conquered during a battle became the property of the king. The only way for the foot soldiers to come away with anything more than scars and missing limbs was to steal it. This was known as the spoils of war. If you could grab it before someone else, it was yours. Once the fighting was done, you could no longer run around stealing things because everything now belonged to either the king or some other royal. Relics were all the rage. If you could find some precious item and take it back to Europe and sell it, you could become very well off. Most of these soldiers weren't knights in shining armor. They were boneheads in rusty chainmail. They would wander about looking for valuables to take with them. There have been folks who sell you anything not tied down. Sometimes they even sell things that are cemented to the ground. George C. Parker was known as the greatest con man in American history. He managed to sell landmarks like Madison Square Garden, the Statue of Liberty, and the Brooklyn Bridge. He sold the Brooklyn Bridge twice in 1 week, one time for as much as $50,000. The police were kept busy as the new owners were trying to set up toll booths in the middle of the bridge. Well, way back then, the folks would travel to the Holy Land from Europe all the time. The merchants would see some pilgrim wandering around with the look of a man with more money than sense on their faces. Artifacts would be displayed with stories of connections to just about any biblical figure, from Noah to Jesus. Once the mark was back home, he was driven to convince everyone he had not been taken. Nobody wants to look stupid. There are more relics on hand than people to have created them. A really good money-making item would have been copies of the Spear of Destiny. How many copies might have been out there is anyone's guess. In 1097, the First Crusade was in full swing. Well, actually, the First Crusade was in the 1400s when the Moors were driven from Europe. The Christian army of the so-called First Crusade arrived in the city of Antioch October 27, 1097. The three principal leaders of the crusade, Godfrey of Boulogne, Bohemond of Toronto, and Raymond IV of Toulouse, disagreed on what course of action to follow. Raymond advocated a frontal assault on the city's defenses, while his compatriots favored laying siege. Bohemond and Godfrey ultimately prevailed, and the city was loosely surrounded, very loosely. As the Crusaders lacked the men to completely surround Antioch, the southern and eastern gates were left unblockaded, allowing the governor of the city to bring food in at night. The whole idea of a siege was to starve the city into surrender. In November, the Crusaders were reinforced by troops under Bohemond's nephew, Tancred. This gave them the manpower to block all the city gates and stop supplies from getting in. As the siege drug on, the Crusaders began to face starvation. After defeating a Muslim army in February, additional men and supplies arrived in March. This allowed the Crusaders to completely surround the city while also improving conditions in their camps. In May, news reached them that a large Muslim army commanded by Kerboga was marching towards Antioch. Knowing that they had to take the city or be destroyed, Bohemond secretly contacted the Armenian named Firuz, who commanded one of the city gates. After giving him a huge bribe, Firuz opened the gate on the night of June 2nd, allowing the Crusaders to storm the city. The armies consolidated their power, and they rode out and met Carboa's army on the evening of June 28th. The morning of June 28th. The army that had terrified them now didn't look so nasty. What had changed? The story goes that in Antioch somebody had discovered the Spear of Destiny hidden away in one of the buildings. Nobody was using it, so it didn't affect the battle. Once one of the Crusader leaders was wielding it, the spear caused a dramatic change in the armies. Once more, through some mystery, a soldier found the spear and handed it to his leader. The Crusaders charged the Muslim lines. Even though they were outnumbered, they routed the Muslim army, causing a panicked retreat. The spear was made of iron. A nail that was supposed to have been used to crucify Jesus was also found with the tip. The nail was wired to the spear using silver wire, and then it was wrapped in gold, which gives it its very unique look today. Frederick Barbarossa, also known as Frederick I, was the Holy Roman Emperor from 1155 until his death 35 years later. His success is also credited with having the Spear of Destiny. A ruler who had the spear didn't let others know he had it. Anyone, including those working for him, might decide they wanted to be king, and it was good to be the king. All a person would need to do is steal the spear and then attack their former employer. The holder of the spear would keep it hidden away in some hopefully safe spot and keep it a secret from everyone. Kings and rulers didn't trust anyone, especially their own family. If your dad was the king and you wanted to be the king, all you had to do was kill him. Try to think, what small group of people suddenly turned into nearly a world power? Ah yes, the Templars. They came into power in 1119 and fell off in about 1312. They would be in overlap with Frederick of Barbarossa. We don't know for a fact that Frederick had the spear. It is just claimed he did. The sudden rise to the top of the food chain would make a lot of sense if it were because the knights had found the spear or somehow gotten a hold of it. Not only is history written by the victors, it is rewritten by those who become powerful enough to think they know what is best for the rest of us to know. Some say the knights had all of the Arma Christi, the Articles of the Passion. These were the items that were connected with Jesus right at the end. The Holy Grail, the Veil of Veronica, the crown of thorns, the parts of the cross, and the spear. Anything connected with the last days of Jesus on earth. The Templars went from being so poor they had 9 members and only 5 horses. In their heyday, the Templars owned land all over Europe and the Middle East. They had a fleet of ships, and just about every royal family owed them a ton of cash. One story says the knights had found the Ark of the Covenant, and this caused them to jump to the top. Had they found the spear, it would have explained the almost invincibility shown in battle up until the late 1180s. It would explain a lot. Sometimes around this time, the spear fell into someone else's hands. The Templars were arrested in France and a few other countries, but a lot of them managed to escape along with their treasure. In 1424, Sigismund had a collection of relics, including the spear. Sigismund of Bohemia, also known as Sigismund of Luxembourg, was Prince-elect of Brandenburg from 1378 until 1388, and from 1411 until 1415. He was also King of Hungary and Croatia from 1387, a King of Germany from 1411, King of Bohemia from 1419, as well as King of Italy from 1431. He became the Holy Roman Emperor in 1433, and he was the last male member of the House of Luxembourg. Sigismund moved from his capital in Prague to his birthplace, Nuremberg, taking all of his valuables with him, and he decreed that the relic would remain there forever. This collection was called the Reichsklenoden, or Imperial regalia. When Napoleon was marching east towards Germany in the spring of 1796, the city council of Nuremberg decided to remove the imperial regalia to Vienna for safekeeping. The collection was entrusted to one Baron von Hugel, who promised to return the objects as soon as peace had been restored and the safety of the collection assured. The Holy Roman Empire was disbanded in 1806, and imperial regalia remained in the keepings of the Habsburgs. When the Nuremberg City Council asked for the regalia to be returned to them, they were refused. As part of the imperial regalia, the spear was kept in the secular treasure at the Habsburg Museum in Vienna and was known as the Lance Saint Maurice, or the Lance of St. Maurice. In 1914, the Great War, or the War to End All Wars, was getting kicked off. The whole thing was blamed on the assassination of Prince Ferdinand and his wife by a Serbian. Austria demanded all kinds of monetary settlements to pay for his death. One country after another jumped on the bandwagon. Kaiser Wilhelm used it as a reason to invade France. Vienna, Austria was holding the spear, which was easily taken to be used to win the war. Austria looked unstoppable for the first few years of the war, and then things changed. Either the spear was taken from the Kaiser's control, or it was removed far enough from his hand to lose its ability to control events, or it could have been the overwhelming effects of the Spanish flu on their ability to fight. Austria and Germany lost the war in 1918. The Spear of Destiny, also known as the Maurice Spear and the Spear of Longinus, was exhibited in the Hofburg Museum in Vienna. It had attracted the attention of a young Adolf Hitler back when he was just a painter. He linked it with the legends of the Holy Grail, and he made his own plans to be a man of destiny. The spear held a special fascination for Hitler and his associates in the hothouse atmosphere of occultism and evil philosophies that gave rise to the Nazi plan for world domination. April 10, 1934, one of the 12 oak panels that comprise Jan van Eyck's famous painting, Adoration of the Mystic Lamb, was stolen from St. Bavo Cathedral in Ghent, Belgium, in the middle of the night. The Ghent altarpiece is one of the most influential paintings and one of the most stolen. The painting is made up of several sections showing different scenes from the Bible. It has been stolen in part or in whole as many as 6 times. This is quite a feat since the painting is 14 by 11.5 feet and it weighs 2 tons. 2 Nazi leaders raced each other to be the first to steal the altarpiece. The Nazi Art Theft Unit, the ERR, captured it for Hitler. From its hiding place in the Château de Pau in South France, where the Belgian government had sent it for safekeeping. An emissary for Göring managed to steal it from the ERR and send it to the head of the Luftwaffe to be added to his massive stolen art collection. Göring had 7,000 masterpieces displayed at his country estate outside of Berlin. Hitler found out that the head of the Luftwaffe had stolen his stolen artwork. He sent some SS men to grab the painting and take it to Castle, in Bavaria. Yeah, it's one of those German names that's about half a page long. From there, the enormous painting was shipped to Austrian Alps near Altaisee, where the 12,000 of the most famous stolen artworks from the Nazi-occupied Europe were to be kept. Hitler was planning to build a huge museum where he would display all of these works of art and tell people they had all been created by German master artists. The museum was going to be the size of a small city. The iconography of the Ghent altarpiece has long fascinated scholars. The painting was immediately the most famous in Europe when it was completed in 1432. It was the first major oil painting. Oil had been used to bind pigments to paint since the Middle Ages, but Jan van Eyck was the first to demonstrate the true potential of oil, which permitted far greater subtlety and detail than largely opaque egg-based tempera paint. The Ghent altarpiece popularized oil paint and led to a whole new way of painting. Why so many people wanted to get their hands on this one painting has more to do with its secrets than its value. A rumor had been going around for years that the painting was actually a huge map that showed where all of the Arma Christi, the Articles of Passion, could be found. Anyone possessing the painting would be able to decipher the map and find the Holy Grail, the crown of thorns, and any other items connected to Jesus. In the 1930s, the Nazis were sending out members of the Ahnenerbe, or the Ancestral Heritage Research and Teaching Organization, in an effort to find evidence of Germanic and Aryan dominance throughout history. They mostly created history so that it would match Hitler's ideas. One of the top Nazi officials was Heinrich Himmler, the man in charge of the SS, and Himmler was known to engage in the occult. He followed the paganism of pre-Christian Germany, something that was strongly associated with the German nationalism of Nazi regime, and actively involved with black magic. He tried to practice necromancy, the magic art of raising people from the dead, and frequently held seances to try to contact the dead. Believe it or not, back then, the Nazi leaders would encourage SS soldiers to take their girlfriends or their wives to Viking cemeteries in order to have sex, where they hoped to have children that would be empowered by the Viking spirits. What a lovely place to take your date. An old Viking cemetery. Anyway, the center of the occult life was a place called Wellensburg Castle in the Black Forest of northern Germany. Here, Himmler and many other Nazi officials engaged in their occult practices. In 1935, Heinrich Himmler had a replica of the spear made and kept it in his private room. The thought was, if he couldn't have the real thing, maybe a replica would have some amount of power. A team of SS scientists used archaeology to try to understand pre-Christian and medieval German history better to further buttress the Nazi overview. Rudolf Hess was one of the highest-ranking Nazi officials. He was with Adolf Hitler when he tried the initial coup in Bavaria in 1922, the failed Biergarten Putsch, and the two served in prison together. Hess's spiritualism may have actually exceeded that of Himmler. He was a member of the Thule Society, an esoteric organization that was so named after a mythical country in the northern parts of Europe. Some believe it was Germany, that the Greek mythology spoke of. The Thule Society was founded during World War I by German nationalists who, like Hitler, decided that Germany's capitulation at the end of the war was an abomination. At the center of the organization were beliefs about the Aryan race, an idea that the German people had descended from the same people as those of Iranian and Indian plateau. To join, people had to swear to pure Aryan lineage. The Ahnenerbe, which means inheritance of the forefathers, was a paranormal research group established by orders of the SS head Heinrich Himmler in July 1935. It was expanded during World War II on direct orders from the Fuhrer. Hitler and other top Nazi leaders were highly interested in the occult. The Nazi Party actually began as an occult fraternity before it morphed into a political party. Historical artifacts were acquired and brought to one of the many art thieves. They would have Nazi symbols added to make it look as if the antiques had been German instead of whichever country they had come from. There was a Templar helmet that had a swastika added to it. Other art pieces had changes made to them to give the Nazis a feeling of grandeur. Hitler believed that the possession of the Arma Christi would grant their owners supernatural power. Hitler cranked up his efforts to seek some supernatural way to bring victory to the Third Reich. He knew where the spear was, but he still needed the rest of the Arma Christi in order to get the full effects. Hitler declared that Austria was a part of Germany. As soon as they were in Vienna, the SS went to the Hofburg Museum and they seized the spear. It was transported in an armored SS train to Nuremberg on October 13th, the same date that the Knights Templar were arrested centuries earlier. Now all Hitler needed was the rest of the articles to attain ultimate power. The spear remained for 6 years in St. Catherine's Church before it was moved to an underground vault for safekeeping. The spear was hidden in the tunnels that ran beneath Nuremberg Fortress, where it was discovered April 30th, 1946. Some folks want you to believe this was the same day that Hitler shot himself. I think not. The entire Hitler suicide story came about to get Stalin to stop bothering Churchill. As Germany was getting close to the end and the Nazis were fleeing like rats abandoning a sinking ship, Stalin became convinced that the British had captured Hitler. He began sending messages to Churchill saying Hitler belonged to the Russians because of all the nasty things he had done to them. Churchill wanted nothing to do with Stalin. Look at any photos of the Big Three during World War II. Roosevelt is always sitting between Stalin and Churchill. There's a very good reason for this. Churchill wanted nothing to do with the Russian leader. Well, Churchill told the military commanders to do something to get Stalin off his back. During World War II, Trevor Roper served as an officer in the Radio Security Service of the Secret Intelligence Service, and then on the interception of messages from German intelligence and service. He didn't speak or understand German. He was just one of many officers running things. Dick White, the head of the counterintelligence in the British sector of Berlin, sent for Trevor Roper to come to Germany and investigate Adolf Hitler's death and negate the Soviet propaganda that Hitler was alive and living in the West. Using the alias of Major Otten, Trevor Roper interviewed several officials who had been present in the Führer bunker with Hitler on the 30th. This was quite a trick since he didn't speak German. One of those interviewed was a soldier stationed right outside the front door to the bunker, the soundproof front door. The door designed to keep sound of bombs going off all around the bunker so Hitler could get some sleep. The soldier was supposed to have said he heard the sound of a gunshot through the soundproof door. He ran in and found Hitler and Eva Braun dead. He then helped to carry the bodies outside, put them in a ditch, and set them on fire. The burned body found where Hitler was supposed to have been burned turned out to be that of a woman. In order to identify these burnt, destroyed bodies, they used the dental records, which were hand-drawn from memory since the dentist's office was no longer standing. The dental tech must have had quite a memory to be able to come up with so many tiny little details about somebody's bridge work. Yes, I'm getting off the subject. Now back to the spear. When American soldiers found the spear, it was turned over to General Patton. From that moment on, the general was unstoppable in his drive to Berlin. Once Admiral Dönitz had surrendered the German army, no Nazis ever surrendered. The spear was returned to Vienna. About the same time the spear was being handed over, General Patton was involved in a vehicle accident which eventually led to his death. If you want to see the Spear of Destiny, you can visit the museum in Austria, or you can visit the Vatican. There are now several spears being claimed as the original. The Holy Lance, also known as the Lance of Longinus and the Spear of Destiny, have been one of the most popular relics in the Church practically since the Roman Empire adopted Christianity as their religion. The prevalence of its legend is nearly on par with the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant. The popularity of the relic of Christ's Passion has led to the appearance of several versions of the relic. At one time, there were estimated to be 30 nails associated with Christ's crucifixion, and the Lance of Longinus is similar in that there are several countries that claim to hold the sacred spear. Some of these have been denounced as fakes, but there are still 3 spearheads that experts consider might possibly be the actual Spear of Destiny. One is in Armenia, where there is a spearhead said to be the Holy Lance on display at the Museum Manugian, enshrined in a 17th century reliquary. Number 2 Holy Lance is kept beneath the dome of St. Peter's Basilica, although the church has never made any claims to its authenticity. This is the oldest known example of the Holy Lance, which has records that date back to the 6th century. The 3rd Holy Lance is on display in Vienna, Austria. The Vienna lance is the most famous of all. It notably features a golden sleeve that holds the broken pieces of the blade together, as well as the nail from the cross. The Austrian spear is said to have belonged to both Saint Maurice and Constantine the Great, and is credited with the military successes of just about every famous military leader in Europe. How can we figure out which one is the real spear? Someone could grab it. Well, first you'd have to get through all of the security in the museum, or the Vatican, or the other museum, and grab the Spear of Destiny, and then declare war on someone and see how things work out. Much easier would be to see if it heals anyone's sight. If it doesn't work, you'll need to go to the others and try it some more at those places. It could also be that none of the known spears are the real one. The spear held by Hitler looked to have been the real thing. Just look at all the things Germany did until losing the spear to the Americans. Could General Patton have realized the importance as well as the danger to the world if this relic were to fall into someone else's hands? Oh, say, Stalin? The general was very well read on all manner of history. He would have known about any significant battles throughout history, and any stories that went with them, like the commander held the spear. Would Patton have had the foresight and the ability to have a replica made and sent to Vienna so that just in case anything went wrong, the spear would remain in a safe place? After the war, Vienna was divided into several sectors. The United States, Britain, France, and Russia all had access to the city, and it was a mess. The winners tried to keep the peace while at the same time not starting the next big war. Crime was rampant. Knowing how the Soviets were getting just about everything they wanted just to win against the Nazis, Patton might have had the spear recreated. He had an entire army behind him. They had found some gold hidden away here and there. All they needed was a bit of time and an artist who could make a replica spear. You might think there's no way the guys who made the copy would not tell anyone. People take secrets to their graves all the time. Not everybody gets a run of the mouth as they are about to pass on. Will we ever know the truth about the magic spear that holds such power? Probably not. All we have is our own faith in things that might be out there. All those battles that were won despite overwhelming odds were just good strategies on the part of the winners. Well, personally, I think there's more to this mystery than just some stories. We know Jesus was killed by crucifixion. We know he was stabbed with a spear. We just don't know for sure if the spear was affected by the blood. Just remember the phrase, washed in the blood of Christ. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. If you did, tell the world. Yell it from the rooftops, or at least tell your friends about the show. If you have something you'd like to hear on the show, and you have a story to put in my next book, you can contact me at strangethings@arcanasa.com. Until next Saturday, this is Chris James.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, the same murdered three? Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.